In the wind-cut country, a red handkerchief stained brown hung ready on the fence. Beneath the post sat a girl clutching her side, a leather strap freshly cut. The rancher stopped his horse. Save a life or step into a trap. A black coat called it lost property. The lid of a secret sprung open. From here, door latches, low-slung holsters, cracked glasses, all had a way of speaking. Who opens the box? Who rings the bell with wind? Hot wind lashed sideways. Dry straw scraped against itself with a faint rustle. On the fence before him, a red handkerchief, torn in two, pulsed like a dying flame. The damp edge bloomed into a dark brown stain. The brown had dried into a darker rim, as if someone had tried to keep it from running. Both ends had frayed like fish whiskers, caked with dust. No one left something like that to the wind, unless it was meant to be seen. He reined in. The horse hissed between its teeth, sweat soaking into the leather reins. Heat rose from the ground, faintly metallic. No voices, only the soft wire hum of barbed fence when the wind shifted, enough to tell him it still held. Under the wooden post the girl sat, both hands at her side, a thick dust patch on her knee, hair tangled, strands clumped, half hiding her face. Her left wrist bound with a strip of leather, the cut knot still fresh, the severed edge showing pale fiber. Round-toed shoes, soles worn to one side, laces frayed like dry roots. Her breathing short, steady, but each deep draw shut her eyes as if swallowing a thin blade. He didn't call. He dismounted. Boots hit the ground with a dull thud, sinking into fine dust. His shadow stretched over a strip of sunlight, partly covering the red cloth. His brows drew in without thought. The red was no longer bright, faded like something washed many times but never clean. In one fold a black stitch angled back, no woman's hand sewing. She shifted at the creak of stirrup leather. She didn't look up. Her right shoulder sat lower, as if held too long. Right hand gripped left, pressed deep into her ribs, holding there. When he was close enough to reach, she said, her voice hoarse and small enough for the wind to nearly take, "Don't press hard." He stopped where his shadow touched her toes, pulled on. "Anyone with you?" he asked, eyes fixed on the pale dust haze at the horizon. Silence. The wind shifted. The barbed wire rang again, higher this time, then stopped. She moved just enough for cloth to rasp against the post. "No," she said. Chin down, her voice stumbled over breath. "No one comes here for me." It wasn't an answer to his question. It was something else, dropped in wrong. He went down on one knee. Fine sand slid into his trouser leg, rasping skin. He offered his palm, open, without touching. She looked at it, not at him. The look lasted one count, then she placed her left wrist there. Skin cold, pulse thin as a bird's leg. The leather strap had bitten a red groove around her bone. The cut was rough, done with a dull blade or tin shard. He drew a short knife from his shirt pocket, blade nicked and worn, slid it between strap and skin, angled the edge. She held her breath. The knife bit. A small snap like a finger flick. The strap fell away. Her wrist lifted slightly, then dropped into his hand again. The groove turned white, then flushed red. She exhaled, breath catching on pain, eyes blinking once, fast. "This yours?" he asked of the red cloth. Not a wasted question. That color didn't belong in this dust. In years riding through, he'd only seen red on rusted cartridges and flood season warning flags. She looked to the fence, not the cloth. Her lips were dry, a thin crack in the middle darkened as if just licked. "No," she said. Then after a short breath, "I hung it." The second line tightened her mouth, as if she had to drag it out. She didn't explain, didn't say why. The choke came in the silence after. Not loud, not staged, just the dryness in his throat, like swallowing sand. He had thought it a random distress sign. "I hung it," flipped the meaning. Not an accident, a message, meant for someone. He stood. His thumb rolled the knife spine, steel whispering against dry skin. The horse snorted beyond the fence, tail flicking dust. He turned, lifted the cloth down. The stained patch was stiff, Folding it made a flat crackle. He shook it. Tiny dust motes sparked in the sun, then vanished. "Stand," he told. Her chest rose and fell short. Each breath brushed her shirt against the post's stained spot, leaving another faint line. Her left hand found her side again, a habit learned from counting breaths through pain. "You got water?" she asked, not pleading, not thankful, just asking. He passed the skin. She drank 2 small sips. The third ran a beat longer, then stopped before coughing. Her chin lifted to hold it back. Her eyes moved past him, fixing on the road behind him, measuring the way to the dust turn. In the grass clumps under the fence, insects clicked, their silver wings flickering between shadows. Farther off, a hawk tilted its wings, its shadow sweeping the ground like a black brushstroke. The dirt held old hoofprints hardened in the sun, all pointing away toward the road, not in. Someone had stopped here last night. No one had stayed. "You're not asking my name," she said, voice dry, not wary but testing. He heard in it a sharp edge, not because she distrusted him, but because she wanted to know what he intended to do with something he didn't know. He brushed a speck of dust from the knife spine, folded the blade, slid it back into his pocket. "When it's needed," he said. "A name is something given, not something taken." She looked at her own hand. The red strap mark deepened in color. On the back of her hand was a round bruise the size of a little fingernail. Dust caught in it. She rubbed it with her thumb. It didn't come clean. She let it be. Her back rested lightly against the post. The wind pushed her hair back, revealing a yellow-green bruise along the edge of her ribs. It didn't match the side she was holding. One side was deeper. On the red handkerchief, the dark stain dried under the sun, its edge cracked like drought soil. Next to it ran a thin streak deep into the weave, like a thread. He had seen marks like that on the shirts of people dragged across plank floors. Not dropped, dragged. Along the fabric's edge lingered a scent, not wholly metallic, cheap antiseptic, the kind found in cotton and gauze sacks hung behind a store counter. Someone had touched this stain with a hand smelling of that medicine. Someone had patched her up and then left. "Why red?" he asked. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the road. Far explained. That season, 2 horses vanished. That night, shots came from south of the pasture. His throat tightened a second time. The choke sat in the middle, wouldn't go up or down. He swallowed. It stayed. He looked at the red cloth hanging reversed. The pressed circle now faced the road. If someone waited for a sign, they would read it differently. Seen, or moved, or not safe anymore. No word was certain. Only the habit of reading signs learned from living too long out here. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded. The small move pulled a flinch from her, but no sound. He slid his arm behind her back, avoiding her ribs, the weight set at her hip. They took 2 steps into the fence's shadow. The shade was thin, like damp cloth. The smell of old wood mixed with sunburnt hair. "Where will you take me?" she asked. Not suspicion. A schedule. He tilted his head toward the far-off trees, where the dirt road crossed a dry ditch. "Into shade," he said. Then the porch. She looked at the road, at the red cloth, at his hand. "All right." One word. Closed tight. He pulled the reins from the post, threaded them into his left hand, right kept low at his side. Not touching the grip, not showing. Just there. The horse breathed into her coat, taking in the scent of someone new, then let it go. He helped her place a foot in the stirrup. Her ankle trembled lightly, but the tendon held. She caught the saddle rim, not him. That grip told him she had ridden before, if not well. Before leading the horse on, he looked back, looked at the red cloth again. The wind snapped it once, the torn edge knocking the nail with a small click. The sound was as quick as a period. He didn't fix it, didn't take it down, didn't add a thing. He left the signal as it had just become, a sentence he'd answered without using his mouth. They went slow along the fence. She sat sideways, back off the saddle, left hand still on her side. Every rut was a breath held. He counted distance by fence posts, each one a handspan plus half a stride apart. At the 12th post, the road bent into the trees. Cooler. The insect noise thickened, covering some of the space where voices might be. Said, or knows I've seen it. You afraid? She asked, eyes elsewhere. He shook his head, not for bravery, because here, fear was no use. I don't like surprises, he said. Neither do I, she said, her voice flat, but at the end there was a worn place. The porch appeared like a lid dropped over the sunlit yard. The floorboards were gray, one corner lifted for want of a nail. Beside the door hung a bent iron hook, its tip worn smooth from coats over many seasons. He stopped the horse, tied it loose so it could nose at sparse grass. He helped her down. Her foot touched wood, shook once, then steadied. The smell of old boards mixed with the dry sweat of man and horse. No one said thank you. No one said sorry. They stood in the shade one breath longer. Out there the wind still moved the red cloth. In the porch shadow, her short breaths lengthened, but not deep yet. A secret had shown one corner, enough to snag in the throat. He knew he'd stepped into someone else's trouble. She knew he'd seen. Neither could take it back. The wind cut across, bringing the scent of fresh dust. Far off, the fence nail tapped wood again. One small sound with shape. One sound that would stay in his head when the porch door finally closed. He took her across the porch. The boards were pale under the sun, one plank lifting for lack of a nail. The dry wood door gave a fine, thin creak when he pushed it in. The room held the smell of a cooled stove and lamp oil settled on the shelves. On the table was a glass with a hairline crack, the fracture running a ring like a frozen strand inside the glass. He poured water. It met the glass wall with a dull note, not clear. He set the glass down, beside a tin plate with crumbs of cornbread still on it. She sat, her back not touching the chair's rest. Her eyes didn't settle on anything in the room. They went past his shoulder, through the dust-filmed window, and slid out onto the dirt road. She held the glass in both hands as if it were a warm stone, drank slowly. Each swallow was a hard push down, catching somewhere under the ribs before it moved on. Her left shoulder shifted with the rhythm, then stilled. Her right hand let go halfway, brushing the edge of the crack. She flinched, not for fear of breaking it, but because her finger met whose. No voices. He looked past her shoulder. On the shelf an empty cough syrup tin. On the wall a bent coat hook where a gun usually hung. Now bare. He left it bare. The room, because of it, felt like it was listening. She set her left palm on the cracked glass, skin dry and hot. Her thumb marked the crack's place, as if to remember and avoid it. She didn't speak, didn't ask for a bed, didn't ask who he was, only kept her eyes on the road one long breath more, then pulled them away like unhooking something stuck in her gaze. The red handkerchief lay on the stool just inside the door. Wet this morning, now its damp edge was drying, the brown mark darkening. Where dry, the cloth had stiffened, folding with a brittle shk, like half-burnt paper. He looked once, she looked once. Neither lifted it. He passed to fetch a pot, his boot heel catching the stool leg. The cloth slid half an inch, showing more of the black thread in the tear. She pulled in on herself, a small animal long-tied, retreating deeper into its shadow at a new sound. He left it alone. The stool's narrow back seemed to fit it exactly. No one spoke. Wind hit the window. The frame rattled. A sound light as sand against a wall. Outside, horse sweat mixed with the smell of water in the trough. He poured a little into the pan, set it on the stove, didn't light it. His fingers traced the rim of a bowl, stopping at a sharp chip in the glaze. He put the bowl back. She rose, first step unsteady. Her hand caught the table edge, eyes fixed. The leather mark at her wrist had faded, but the red frame still ringed the bone. She moved slow to the red cloth, stopped there, didn't bend to pick it up, just touched it with her toe, sliding it back into the exact place from before. light enough that the dust didn't rise. Done. She turned away. He understood she didn't want it elsewhere. Not to keep, to mark. From the porch came the creak of the chain holding an old milk can. The wind shifted. Dust blew into the door's crack. Tiny grains settled in the crescent watermark on the table, clouding it. She looked to the road again. Her gaze was shorter than when she kept a tin of bandages. Not loud, not bitter, but firm enough to sound like an order. She set her hand on the lid, holding it, then slid it aside. "Don't tell anyone I'm here." He stopped. The tin lid was dented, its painted letters worn. He looked at her fingertips on it. Nails short, a trace of darker dust than the floor in the cuticles. Slowly he pulled his hand back, put the tin where it was. His eyes didn't leave her hand. She lifted it from the lid but kept it near, ready to hold again. "Reason?" he asked. No demand, no promise. The bare question sat between them like an unshaped block. She flicked a quick glance at the red cloth, then at the cracked glass. "Doctors remember faces," she said. "He's good at telling stories." The second line put a different smell in the first. The smell of talk passed on. He drew in a shallow breath. Memory brought up an image. A smile under salt and pepper stubble, a hand holding a cigarette, the phrase, "just checking in," resting on the lip. She stood again, this time toward the sink by the window, where an old medicine bottle stood neck up. Inside, a little yellow fluid. The label warped, the word "car," faint beneath a tear. She twisted the cap, sniffed once, lips tightening. Not from the sting of the smell, from the half-seen seller's name. She turned the bottle, hiding the label in her palm, tipped it. The medicine poured in a thin thread down the drain. The sound was low and long, like a snake's crawl. He watched her pour with a steady hand. No tremor, no pause. She knew that smell, had learned not to let it linger in someone else's house. His throat dried. The choke stayed there. No words passed it. "No one knows I'm here," she went on, still not looking at him. "Leave it that way." She turned the tap to rinse the bottle, upended it to dry. The water hit the sink's mica in quick ticks, then drained, leaving a ring. She wiped it with her shirt hem, slow, not thorough, but enough to smear away half the name left on the label. He leaned on the table edge, body angled. "If someone asks," he said. She turned, back to the sink, hands gripping its lip, the knuckles tight. "Say you someone asleep." She sat, both hands on her lap. Her eyes kept to their work, checking the road, counting breaths, hearing the wind under the door crack. Afternoon broke toward evening with a gray line along the hillside. He lit the lamp. The wick caught the second time, the yellow light flickering to the ceiling, showing rings of soot like the grain of burnt wood. He set the lamp on the table, well away from the cracked glass. The fracture stopped glowing. The evening held almost no words. He sawed a short board to fit under the table's uneven leg. Halfway through, he stopped at the sound of her cough, held in, dry as sand. She didn't ask for water. He didn't offer. In places like this, there was a silent ledger. Each knew their own place. When night settled fully, he took a coarse blanket from the chest, set it on the long bench by the wall. "Lie here," he said. She nodded, rose, her eyes touching the red cloth. Her hand brushed the stool's edge like counting. Then she didn't lie down. She went straight to the door. The slide bolt moved in the wood groove twice. Clack, then clack. Not quick, not hidden. She never looked at him. Her eyes slid over the window glass as if checking its reflection, then stopped on her shadow in it. She checked the bottom latch, loosened the cord, fastened it. Top latch. Set. Done. She returned to the bench, sat, her back still straight. That was the turn in full. All day he had held the door for her. At night, she held it, barred from the inside. He heard the clock's hand tap the side of its old wooden case. 1, 2, 3. In those taps was another sound, him thinking he was the guard, only to find himself in a room where someone else had just made the rules. He said nothing about the bolt, went to the windowsill. His finger lifted the curtain's edge. Outside was one solid black. No moon, no light, only the dirt road settling dust, and far off, the rope on the watermill turning once, then stopping. He let the curtain fall. The old curtain pull, round-headed, chipped glaze, sat at his eye level. A fresh scratch ran across it. She drew the blanket over herself, didn't lie down. Not near, not far. The wind slipped under the door, carrying the smell of foxtail and rust. The choke came back, rounder. Not from fear, from knowing something might be out there, or would be, and the one who had barred the door from inside knew it better than he did. "Sleep," he said, not looking at her. "I'll keep watch." She didn't answer. The silence wasn't thanks, wasn't refusal. It was like a nail driven into a beam, struck once, left there. He tilted his head back one notch, eyes open. The night passed slow as cold mud. The oil in the lamp dropped a mark. The wick shortened, the light pulling in toward the table's center. The cracked glass stood at the light's edge, its fracture black again, no longer lit. The red cloth on the stool had dried through. The brown mark had gone brick-colored, its edge roughened. When the wind slid through the door's seam, the glass's rim gave a faint ring. She twitched her shoulder. He didn't move. Just before the wild roosters by the ditch gave their first call, she let herself down onto the bench. Didn't pull the bolt. Didn't ask if he was cold. Her back met the wood, her breath dropping one step. One hand still on her side. Eyes half shut, leaving a thin white line under the lid. Outside, the sky paled at the rim like old tin. Inside, the bolt stayed set. The room in the hands of the hurt. The other sat within rules just made, silent in keeping. When the first gray reached the dried watermark on the table, he leaned back deeper in the chair. His spine gave a small pop. No pain, only the mark of a body held too long in one shape. He looked to the red cloth one last time before day came up. Didn't ask, didn't touch. He understood there'd been a small betrayal inside her don'ts earlier. She needed him to lie for her, hold the door for her, but not have the key. And oddly, he accepted it, because in this land, some doors only open from the wounded side. All he could do was sit on the other side, count breaths, and wait for the bolt's first loosening some other day. 3 days passed like a wet plank left out, never drying. Noon sun heavy, wind thin. He was in the backyard, holding the barn hinge steady, the hammer striking its step tight, no wasted strike. He reined in at the gate. Dust lifted, hung, then fell back over the rope in a fine powder. The rancher walked out, right hand still holding the hammer in a working grip that wasn't working. Left hand light on the gate's crossbar, wood worn smooth from years of touch. No greeting, no question who. He waited for the man to name his own reason. The man gave none. His voice went flat through his teeth, dry, level, looking for something lost. Then stopped. The word thing slid past the ear like a greased object, couldn't hold it. Inside, a chair scraped. A thin pause. Then the sound of a bolt easing open halfway, like someone holding it quiet but still wanting the outside to hear. She stood in the doorway, one hand on the jamb, the other holding the red handkerchief, grip so tight her fingertips had gone white. Cloth stretched. The dried brown stain on it made her hand dirtier. The wind turned. Wet leather, rust, the sweat of an old horse. He lifted his chin. Light hit across, showing a strip of stubble he hadn't shaved well. The corner of his mouth rose by one notch, short of a smile. His eyes found her and stayed, like a man fixing a mark in a blink's gap. "Well now," he said, soft as mentioning an old debt. "Here you are." His gaze slid over the rancher as if over a fence, without sizing. The rancher kept his hand on the crossbar. The hammer lay along his thigh like a spare bone. "This gate doesn't open for that talk," he said. Flat. No rise. No sink. The man didn't move. The horse's nostrils drew in, blew once, eyes blinking fast. He scratched its nose bridge with a fingernail, slow, deliberate. "I'm taking what's mine," he said, as if reciting a rule to a dull student. Nothing else. Her grip on the doorframe pulled the tendons high in her knuckles. The red cloth wrinkled more, sweat soaking the fabric in her palm, making it cling. She didn't look at the rancher, didn't look at the horse. She stared into the shadow cast by his hat brim on the dirt, a dark center in the light. Her eyes didn't. A tendon pulled taut through the moment. She drew breath. It hit pain. Her eyes narrowed halfway. The choke sat in her throat's center. She lifted the red cloth to her chest, clenched as if to tear it. 2 fingers slid into the brown stain, picking up dry grit. She spoke, no louder than the wind. "He's right. I did belong to him." No one answered that. It hung on the threshold like a knife stuck point up. It cut no one else. It pointed at the speaker. Her lips whitened more. At the joint of her thumb a tremor started, forced down. Her eye corners wet but unspilled, the water held back by a skin-thin wall. He breathed out, short as a smirk. Satisfaction flared at his mouth and died. "You hear that?" he said to the rancher without looking. She said it. "Open the gate." The rancher shifted the hammer crosswise, not heavier, just set different. His forefinger touched a dent in the crossbar, a misplaced nail's old scar. He heard his own blood in his ears, then still. She said, "Used to," he said. "This gate doesn't open for used to." A fly landed at the horse's eye. The horse tossed its head. The reins rang, iron rings snapping. He held it. His gloves were thin, fingertips darkened, ink or something else. He leaned. The brim moved. His gaze hit hers square, no swerve. "Come here," he said. No bark, no boom, like calling an animal trained right. That tone drew the cloth tighter in her fist. Her nails bit into it until they hurt. She didn't move. A silence opened, wide as a barn cleared of hay. In it, the mill wheel by the ditch groaned one tired turn and stopped. The clock in the house ticked into loose beads. 5, 6, 7, then stuck. All of it sounded like a machine run dry. He moved the horse another half step. The hoof edge scraped stone, making a high rasp. "Don't make it hard," he said. "I'm easy with those who know their place." His easy felt like a fingerprint pressed into wet clay, left to set. She looked at the red cloth. Light came through it, the brown stain throwing a shadow in another shade onto her skin. A half notch. The twist didn't come in a shout. It came in a step. She didn't back into the porch shadow. She stepped forward, one tread, then another. Her heels set firm in the sunlight, past the door's edge, standing between the 2 men, her shadow crossing his at the gate, cutting a small piece from it. The red cloth hung, torn edge brushing her coat hem, leaving a faint brown line. He tilted his head enough to see her side, the green-yellow under the ribs rise. The other man tilted his enough to measure the horse's chest to the step. Both heard the fine crack in the dirt, a sound only those used to waiting would catch. "Only once, I'll tell it all," she said. Her voice was rigid, each word like a round packed in the chamber but not fired. No lift, no drop, set there. He stifled a grin. The rancher didn't. The wind came sideways. Dust on the black coat's shoulder shifted, showing a crooked seam at the yoke, quick work by an unpracticed hand. His gloved finger tapped the saddle horn 3 times. The iron rang once. "Talk," he said, leaning in, like someone just opening a small box to hear what's inside. "Talk so I don't have to search." She didn't turn to him for leave, didn't ask for protection. She set the cloth on the threshold, not dropped, placed, wrong side up, the pressed circle facing the gate. Her hand left the fabric, her little finger trembled once, then stilled. Her eyes held his. A strand of hair slipped loose from the knot, caught in the sweat at her temple, stuck there. She didn't brush it back. Inside, the bolt on the door dropped from a push of wind, clicking once like a dry cough. The cracked glass gave a thin tremor. The gray horse licked its lips, shifted weight to its back legs. The rancher tightened his grip on the hammer to keep it from slipping, callous, rasping wood. "Listen through," she said again, still standing between them. That day, she stopped for one clean beat, planting a stake. "You left something you didn't want found, and I kept it." He didn't blink. The skin above his lip laid on too heavy. He lifted his chin enough for the brim's shadow to slide. The rancher saw his neck tauten, faint tendons rising. He also saw the man's hand shift half a joint from the saddle horn, gloved forefinger flexing. All small. All the sound of wind through a stretched string. She didn't back up. Her heels were nailed to the ground. The rancher kept the crossbar, hammer laid across, breath tight between his teeth. The man exhaled, weight on wood. All three knew, in this exact beat, the story had tipped toward a new slope. Not the way the horse had come, not the way the door might shut, but toward the way things buried long can end up on a step, wrong side out, uncovered. And she, with the red cloth laid down like a spent signal, stood between them and spoke her opening. No shout, no shake, like reading her own name aloud after years of answering to another. Wind pushed dust to the yard's edge. Their three shadows stretched to the gate's edge, meeting in the middle. A far metal bell struck once, from nowhere, and died. No one moved. No one blinked. Everything waited for the next line, and it would come, like a knife drawn from a sheath by one very slow hand. She wasn't telling it for belief. She told it like someone dropping stones into a well, measuring depth by the echo. "In the south granary," she said, eyes never leaving him. "On the third post from the door, there's a black enamel button with the glaze chipped, letter R carved backward. You dropped it. I picked it up. I didn't carry it away. I left it where you'd fear most." Wind tilted the brim of his hat. His mouth stopped one mark before a smile. She went on. "And the bottle marked car, half the label gone, in the sink at my place." Her hand flicked inside. "That smell holds longer than the man. Whoever came with me that day still carries it." The last line was a blunt knife pressed to thin skin. He didn't look inside. He looked at the red cloth on the step, wrong side up, the pressed circle facing the gate like a third eye. He backed the horse half a hoof. The reins rasped in his hand. Dust kicked under the shoe and hung mid-sun. "You've got past the fence line." The hammer the rancher had left in the barn came down once, twice, solid, as if reminding the yard there was still work. She stayed where she was, didn't sit, didn't lean, both hands empty, one resting light on her side, right where the pain had been held. Inside, the cracked glass caught a sun strand, fracture lighting, then going dark. The yard let out part of its breath, not all. When the dust under his horse still hung like chalk marks, the rancher understood. The red cloth wasn't a rescue. It was a rendezvous. Its place wasn't where someone fell. It was where someone had been, and someone else would come. She had hung it herself. He had turned it once, wrong side out. He had, without knowing, answered a signal not meant for him. His throat dried sudden, like full of sand. The choke sat center, neither up nor down. He remembered the red strip at the smithy in the dry season, how he'd pulled it down for being in the way. That night there'd been gunfire south of the pasture. He hadn't tied the two. Today they snapped together with a single click. She bent for the cloth, folded it once, the brown stain hidden inside. She didn't look at him. She didn't cut the signal. She only changed its shape in her hand. Small move, but enough for him to see he was inside a circle of rules, marks and readers that weren't his. He was here, had seen, had touched, had turned, now had learned. And knowing meant carrying it like smoke in a coat. You wash it, it stays. He glanced through the door crack to the kitchen table. The cracked glass stood where it was, the dried crescent mark still edged in white. On the wall, the bent iron hook, the bare one that made the wall feel heavier. In the chest, the folded tax paper bound with twine, its stamp water-blurred. He remembered it hanging on a nail, not filed yet, waiting for rain. Keeper, I'll lose the land, formed in his head before he reached the barn. The reversal happened quiet as shifting weight on old planks. She from someone kept to someone carrying the sign. He from keeper of the door to keeper of the secret. A secret that could cut him before it saved her. He knew it, and didn't put it down. The hand that had held a hand where the man's hand had rested was a new dark patch, sweat from a black glove. The last hoof ring was pressed deeper than the rest, as if weight had been added for memory's sake. Far off, the watermill groaned once, dragged through less than half a turn, then quit. Inside, the cracked glass gave a fine, hard sound. Whether from wind or the table shifting under a step, no one could say. She stood on the porch, eyes following the dust until it thinned into nothing. She bit her lip at the same place as an old crack in it. The edge was darker red. She let go, didn't wipe it, didn't deny what she'd just heard. She knew what it was. He knew too. From the field's edge a few crows wheeled. Their wing shadows swept the ground like black brushstrokes. No neighbors showed, only a speck on the road's curve, not coming closer, not waving. The word had gone out faster than feet. Hay in the yard was mixed, some bundles just brought in, green at the roots, some old, gray-threaded, all lighter for the dry air. He knew by afternoon someone would call his hay damp and drive the price down. It didn't need saying. The thread at the gate had already turned into a set of scales. He went back into the house, past the stool. The red cloth was gone. On the seat, a faint rectangular shadow in the dust. He didn't ask. Everything had taken its new place. The bad luck into the hands that could hold it. The black clinging to the light. The beam said nothing, but its grain was showing darker. In the barn, the smell of old straw mixed with horse sweat, like salt in warm water, a scent that sticks to the back of a shirt all day. He stood the hammer against the doorframe, pulled the reins off the post, smoothed each strap, stopping at a worn spot. She came in after, road dust still clinging to the rim of her boots, heels not striking clean because she stepped soft. "Keep you, I'll lose the land," he said without looking at her, eyes on a swirl of trampled straw like someone reading weather in the dirt. He could see the paper handed to him, the red stamp smudged, the date set. He could see the man coming to bargain low, hands in pockets, smile not touching his eyes. Give the reins. He didn't work in detail. He counted cost in objects. A broken post you replace, torn tin you patch, cut rope you splice, a cracked bone no one can mend for you. She looked at him longer than any look yet, as if weighing the back of a man hauling weight. "You're trading what you know for what you don't," she said, "but I have nothing to pay you in land." It sounded like a confession, but she didn't lower her head. The choke rose to her chest, then passed, leaving quiet. He pulled down an empty sack from its hook above, shook the old straw out, dust making a thin screen. He hung the sack on the hook by the door, the one that used to hold a gun. It had hung bare so long the wall might have forgotten its weight. He touched the wood, smooth and cool, marked with two faint circles where barrels had rested over seasons. "No trade," he said at last, "just standing where no one stands." She nodded, small as breathing. He heard the watermill strain another half-turn, then give up. The sun dropped a notch. Dust in the barn lay finer on the horse's skin, making the coat look powdered. He went into the house with steps that measured the floor. On the wall, the bent iron hook waited. The rifle was in a leather sleeve under the bed, long unused, with a thin layer of old oil. He pulled it out, opened it, wiped it. The oil smell came up cold. The firing pin worked smooth. A single round rolled across the table, touching the cracked glass with a tick. The crack lit for a breath, then went dark. He changed the hook's place. Not high, out of reach like before. He fixed a new one low, beside the door, where any hand could take it. The hammer hit the wall 3 times. The wood took it, solid. He hung the rifle on the low hook. The short scabbard touched the wall with a dull knock. Everything paused a second to take in the new place. She stood on the porch, the red cloth in her hand, one corner showing like a short blade. She looked at the low hook, then at him. She didn't ask why. She knew. Next time there'd be no distance, no porch between yard and door, no table between hands, no low voice between intent. The thing would be within reach, so words wouldn't have to go around. He untied, eyes on the road. The rifle was on the low hook, in reach, one finger from grip to aim. She stood inside, back to the wall where soot had marked over years, her empty hand resting exactly where a rope had once been tied. The door bolt clicked in a puff of wind, then stilled. No more talk. The silence thickened an inch, then lay still, like ground after the third plowing. The choke was no longer in the throat. It had dropped into the hand. The hand here was already on its object, the object already in its place. The new rule stood at the door, not on paper, not in words, by hook, by rifle, by a shared thought. When that dust finally falls, the story will stand up in another voice. Rumor spread like dry grass catching fire. Not in a day, just that passers-by began tipping their hats lower at the porch. Wagon wheels slowed but did not stop. A clipped nod. The window across the street shut one more slat. On the chalkboard outside the general store, a new line appeared. No credit. The white smear of chalk dust still clung to Mrs. Carver's apron hem as she turned away. The north wind came early. The fringe of barbed wire on the fence had gone dry and brittle. One flick and it would snap. By morning, the rim of the water trough wore a thin glaze of ice, smelling of raw iron. The horses drew breath to their chests and blew it out white. The watermill groaned like an old man shifting in bed, turned part of a round, then gave up. In the barn, the straw underfoot had clumped hard. Stepping on it sounded solid, not soft. The hay in the yard thinned. Each bale pulled down from the rack left a square vacancy, the wood beneath grayer than its surround. He counted with his eyes. 17, then 16. The rope chafed his hands with twin red stripes like furrows in a field. He mixed old straw into fresh to make it last. The horses ate slow, chewed long, as if they understood the math. Every evening someone passed along the road. Fresh hoofprints, narrow at the toe. They did not stop. Once they paused right at the fence post where a broken nail still stuck, then moved on. His nails, shoulders hunched to the hammer, eyes avoiding the shine on steel. One woman went to market with her. Her steps slowed by the salt shelf, sped up at the scale counter. When she left, the bell on the frame rang long and elastic, as if scolding someone for leaving too fast. Back home, she lifted the small wooden box in the cabinet's corner, grain running lengthwise, hinges clicking as it opened. She folded the red cloth in quarters, the brown stain hidden inside, the key thin as a needle. She turned it, heard the latch tongue catch in the slot. The key came out, went under the drawer liner. A ritual. Once a night. The white strap mark on her wrist was fading but not gone. Her eyes passed over it like someone recalling a boundary line moved back a few feet. Night fell faster. The tin roof drew in on itself, popped a few times, then went still. He sat on the porch step, back to the frame, eyes on the road. No cigarette, no drink. The door bolt was shot, but the rifle still hung in plain reach, where any hand could take it. The wind came through the porch, carrying the smell of dry leaves crushed under boots. He found the sound unfamiliar, unsettling, like someone waiting outside long without calling. On the third morning since the man came, a crow perched on the gate nail. Its claws scraped loose a pinch of rust powder. 2 wing beats, and it was gone. Out in the yard, 13 bales left. He didn't need to count again to know. He'd held the number in his hand since the night before. Cold slanted into the house like a stranger standing too close. She woke halfway through the night, unsure if from a dream or a sound. Stayed still, listening. The clock in the wooden box ticked slow. The mill on the ditch groaned once and stopped. Wind slid through the floorboards, carrying the smell of cold ash. She rose without lighting a lamp, bare feet on cold planks. 7 steps to the cabinet, 3 to turn, 1 more to the corner. The wooden box was there. The keyway glinted in the dark. She touched it. The metal was cold. Her finger eased the lid. It lifted halfway, unlocked. She froze. Hand. Whose hand? Silence all through. Inside the box was the faintest thread of medicine smell, the kind she'd poured away from the car bottle. This smell wasn't from that bottle. It was from the cloth, steeped deep, now escaping in its absence. She put the key back in place, shut the lid, held it down a beat longer than usual. Across the room, the low hook and rifle were still there. The space between her and the hook had not changed, but the space between her and the cloth had turned into something else. A debt. Debt to him. Debt to the fact she had brought that thing into this house. Her throat salted over. Outside, the porch chain on the milk can clinked in the wind. In the floor's corner, fine dust held half a wet footprint, dried pale at the rim. Could be hers, could be from yesterday, could be not. She didn't check further. She sat again on the stool, looking at the crack in the glass, catching a thin fire from the lamp's dying wick. He woke to the change in wind. No voices, just the shift in pressure, like a fiddler turning a peg. He reached for the door hinge, touched it. Cold. He sat still a while longer. Didn't ask, what happened? Didn't ask, where's the cloth? In this country, what's lost is not what people speak of first. They just move another object to let it know it's been lost. Near dawn she lay down, eyes open longer than the dark. Beside her, the wooden box pressed against the stool leg like a small animal keeping watch. She didn't lock it, left it ajar, a decision without words. Inside, the house held its breath. Outside, the road lay empty of footsteps. Only the ice on the trough rim cracked in a fine line as the temperature turned. Early the next morning, the sky was clear as freshly wiped glass. A thin violet sun edged the horizon, the wind cold but steady. He stepped into the kitchen. The glass cup's crack was still at the same spot. The fracture circled like a dry vein, catching the light and letting it go when he moved his hand. He held the cup. Cold from the base touched his wrist. He didn't pour water, didn't drink. He walked to the door. On the frame, the old nail was just at his eye level. For you, cutting the sun into 2 thin slices. In the stable, a horse pricked its ears, listening. Inside, a low hook and a gun touched lightly when dust wind passed the door crack, giving a faint metal note. He sat on the step, back leaned, hands resting across his knees. Wind again, cup again. The pitch rose, then faded, depending on the wind's blade. Each time it rang, she counted in her head. 1, then 1 again. Not 2, not 3. The choke in her chest eased by a notch, not gone. The wooden box inside remained slightly open, dust edging it like the border of a letter never sent. On the road, old hoof marks had blurred. New dust covered the old. The last roomer had grown tired, like a runner too long without water. The yard held 12 bales of hay. Sunlight laid over them, square by square, no warmer. She lifted the broom, brushed lightly across the porch, chased a few dry leaves from the door. Leaves slid down the steps, lay still. She counted the cup's sound once more. No change. She went into the kitchen, her hand passing over the box without touching it. Stood a beat, then turned back. Passing the low hook, her fingers no longer reached for the holster. That habit had ended when the scarf was gone. He looked at the road for a long time. At the sky's edge, a small dust cloud rose and fell apart. Could be wind, could be stray calves, could be nothing. The cup rang again. The sound carried farther than before, like someone answering in silence from somewhere out there. He didn't say, "Come inside." She didn't say, "Do you hear it?" Out here, questions came from objects before they reached a mouth. Near noon, the cup's shadow on the door shifted an inch. The crack cast a thin, ink-like line. He stood, tapped the nail once, hearing the wood take it. The cup sat firmer. Wind passed, the tone held steady. No one spoke of the red handkerchief. That thing had left the house somehow, leaving a gap sound now had to fill. Betrayal might have happened. From whom, when, by which hook? No one checked anymore. Only this poor man's bell stood at the door, mouth to the road, speaking for human mouths. Someone's watching. The house is breathing. Something is unfinished. Toward evening a thing could reach. On the door's nail, the cracked rim cup faced the road, swayed faintly in the wind, its sound going far and then dying. The story stops there. One thing gone, one new signal hung, and one promise never written down. Who opened the box? Who took the scarf still smelling faintly of medicine? Was the silence meant to protect, or was it also a way to betray the one who had opened the door to them? Sometimes betrayal makes no loud noise. It only changes places, from red cloth to the ring of glass, from a latched bolt inside to a gun grip within reach. Out here they call that survival. But the cost of survival, each counts their own. So what do you think? Between safety and truth, which side do you take? Between keeping the land and keeping a person, which object does your hand reach for first? The gun's holster or the door's bolt? Speak in your own way. Out here, even silence leaves a mark.